Greetings everyone. We're gathered here to figure out WTF was, is, or will be. Knyaz Suvorov. Let's dive in. The Knyaz Suvorov was one of 5 Borodino-class pre-dreadnought battleships constructed for the Imperial Russian Navy in the early 1900s. Completed in 1904, during the Russo-Japanese War, the ship quickly took on an important role as the flagship of Vice Admiral Rozhestvensky, who led the 2nd Pacific Squadron. The squadron was initially deployed to the Far East to relieve the Japanese blockade of Port Arthur, but while they were on their way, the port fell to the Japanese. As a result, their mission changed, and they set course for Vladivostok instead. During the famous Battle of Tsushima on May 27, 1905, Knyaz Suvorov found herself in a critical position. A direct hit to her bridge knocked the ship out of the formation, killing the helmsman and severely injuring both the captain and Rozhestvensky himself. Despite the crew's best efforts, the ship became a sitting target. Eventually, Japanese torpedo boats closed in, launching the fatal blows. The battleship sank beneath the waves, with only 20 wounded officers being rescued by a destroyer. Tragically, none of the other crew members survived. The Borodino-class battleships were based on the French-built Cesarevich but adapted to fit Russian technology and construction methods. These ships were part of an 1898 program aiming to strengthen Russia's naval presence in the Pacific with 10 powerful battleships. Knyaz Suvorov measured about 389 feet long at the waterline and 397 feet overall. Her width spanned roughly 76 feet, and her draft sat just over 29 feet, slightly deeper than originally planned. She weighed about 14,415 tons to 900 tons heavier than her intended design. Normally, the ship housed 28 officers and 754 sailors, but during the Battle of Tsushima, her crew swelled to 928. Powering the ship were 2 vertical triple-expansion steam engines, each connected to its own propeller shaft. Steam was generated by 20 Belleville boilers, giving the engines a rating of 15,800 horsepower and allowing for a top speed of 18 knots. However, Knyaz Suvorov only managed 17.5 knots during her sea trials in August 1904. The ship's coal capacity enabled a range of about 2,590 miles at a steady speed of 10 knots. The Borodino-class battleships carried a main battery of 4 12-inch guns, set in 2 turrets, one at the front and one at the rear. They also had a secondary armament of 12 6-inch guns, positioned in 6 turrets along the upper deck, with 3 on each side. For defense against smaller ships, there were 20 smaller 3-inch guns mounted in the sides of the hull, and 20 even smaller 47mm guns installed in the superstructure. In addition to these, 4 15-inch torpedo tubes were installed, 2 above water at the bow and stern, and 2 submerged on either side. To protect the ship, the armor along the waterline ranged from 5.7 to 7.6 inches thick, with the turrets protected by armor up to 10 inches thick. The decks were covered by armor between 1 to 2 inches thick, and a 1.5-inch lower deck was angled to connect to an anti-torpedo bulkhead of the same thickness. Construction of Knyaz Suvorov, named after the famed Russian military leader Prince Alexander Suvorov, began on August 10, 1901, at the Baltic Works shipyard in St. Petersburg. A formal ceremony to lay down one of the ship's plates took place on September 8, attended by Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich, the General Admiral of the Imperial Russian Navy. By September 25, 1902, the ship was launched with notable figures like Tsar Nicholas II, Grand Duke Constantine, and King George I of Greece in attendance. After 2 years of work, the ship was completed in September 1904, as the Russo-Japanese War was well underway. Its construction cost a staggering 13,841,000 rubles. On October 15, 1904, Knyaz Suvorov, now serving as the flagship of Vice Admiral Rozhestvensky, commander of the 2nd Pacific Squadron, set out from Libo, leading the fleet to reinforce the 1st Pacific Squadron at Port Arthur and break the Japanese blockade. However, Rozhestvensky received troubling reports about Japanese agents and potential threats, leading him to instruct his fleet to remain on high alert after stopping for coal at Skagen, Denmark, on October 7th. The tension rose further the next evening when the fleet, near Dogger Bank, received a distress call from the repair ship Kamchatka, reporting an attack by torpedo boats. Only a few hours later, in the dense fog, the Russian fleet mistakenly opened fire on British fishing trawlers, sinking one and damaging others, resulting in the loss of several fishermen's lives. To make matters worse, friendly fire also hit the Russian cruisers Aurora and Dmitry Donskoy. This incident sparked outrage in Britain and nearly triggered a war. It wasn't until Russia formally apologized and agreed to pay reparations on October 29 that tensions eased. Rozhestvensky then guided his fleet south along the Atlantic coast of Africa, rounding the Cape of Good Hope and reaching Nosy Be, an island off Madagascar, by January 9, 1905. The fleet stayed there for 2 months as Rozhestvensky arranged for more coal. During this time, he learned that Port Arthur had fallen to the Japanese, so the fleet's destination was shifted to Vladivostok, the only major port left under Russian control in the Far East. By March 16, the squadron set sail again, heading for Cam Ranh Bay in French Indochina, where they arrived nearly a month later. There, they waited for Rear Admiral Nikolai Nebogotov's 3rd Pacific Squadron, which arrived on May 9. With the full force assembled, the fleet began its journey toward Vladivostok on May 14. In preparation for the upcoming battle, Rozhestvensky reorganized his fleet into 3 divisions. The first led by Knyaz Suvorov at the front, with the newest Borodino-class battleships, followed by an older group of battleships and an armored cruiser in the 2nd Division, while Nebogotov led the 3rd Division of outdated ships. At this point, Knyaz Suvorov and her sister ships were heavily loaded with coal and supplies. The excess weight, stored high in the ships, compromised their stability, making them around 1,700 tons heavier than their intended design. This caused the ship's waterline armor belts to sit lower in the water than intended, leaving only about 4 feet of the upper armor belt exposed, further weakening their defense. The Battle of Tsushima proved to be a decisive moment for the Russian fleet. On May 27, 1905, Vice Admiral Rozhestvensky chose the direct route through the Tsushima Strait to reach Vladivostok. However, his fleet was intercepted by the Japanese, led by Admiral Togo Heiichiro. As the Russian fleet moved through the strait, the ships were arranged in separate columns. The 2nd Division, led by the battleship Aslyabya, was on the left, with the 3rd Division following behind. Shortly after noon, despite already being spotted by the Japanese, Rozhestvensky attempted to bring his ships into proper formation, but miscommunication among his signalmen caused confusion. As a result, the 1st Division, including Knyaz Suvorov, found itself slightly out of position. Admiral Togo initially received inaccurate information about the Russians' location, but when he spotted them, he quickly maneuvered his fleet. Rather than engaging directly, he crossed in front of the Russians and reversed course to take a favorable position. At 2:05 p.m., Knyaz Suvorov fired the first shot at Togo's flagship Mikasa from a distance of about 6,300 yards. Mikasa returned fire, supported by other Japanese ships like Asahi and Azuma. As the Japanese firepower intensified, Knyaz Suvorov was struck multiple times, setting the ship ablaze. By 2:35 p.m., shell fragments hit the conning tower, killing the helmsman and wounding both Rozhestvensky and the ship's captain. Despite the crew's best efforts, the ship had to be steered from a secondary control area as the fires grew out of control. At 2:52 p.m., Knyaz Suvorov was struck again, jamming its steering gear, causing the ship to circle uncontrollably. Further hits disabled water hoses, making it almost impossible to extinguish the spreading fires. The ship's aft 12-inch gun turret was destroyed in an explosion, while the forward funnel collapsed and the mainmast was shot away, leaving the ship in a dire condition. As the battle raged on, Knyaz Suvorov never regained its position in the Russian battle line. Between 3:20 and 3:35 p.m., it came under fire from Mikasa, Shikishima, and 5 cruisers led by Vice Admiral Kamimura Hikinojo. Despite the onslaught, the Japanese torpedoes failed to hit the ship at first. However, the situation worsened when the Japanese cruiser Chihaya fired 2 torpedoes, claiming a hit even though the ship's condition remained relatively unchanged. Knyaz Suvorov's bow was now noticeably lower, with thick smoke billowing from her damaged superstructure. The 5th Destroyer Division attacked soon after but failed to land any significant blows, though a shell from Knyaz Suvorov did manage to hit one of the destroyers. At 4:08 p.m., Knyaz Suvorov was caught between the two fleets and became the target of concentrated fire from multiple Japanese ships. Those witnessing the scene compared the burning battleship to an erupting volcano. Despite being hit by 2 more torpedoes, Knyaz Suvorov stayed afloat. A 12-inch shell struck near one of the remaining turrets at 4:30 p.m., causing a large explosion and sending flames high into the air. Although her condition worsened, the ship showed no signs of sinking. By 5:05 p.m., the 4th Destroyer Division launched another attack, and this time one of the 6 torpedoes struck the ship. With a 10-degree list to port, Knyaz Suvorov kept fighting, even landing a hit on the destroyer Asagiri. Still, the ship's fate was sealed. At around 5:30 p.m., the Russian destroyer Binyi arrived and evacuated the wounded officers, including Rozhestvensky. With the ship under the command of an unwounded midshipman, Knyaz Suvorov drifted southward at a slow 4 to 5 knots. By 6:30 p.m., more Japanese cruisers engaged her. The final blow came at 7:20 p.m. when 4 torpedo boats from the 11th Torpedo Division attacked. 2 or 3 torpedoes hit the ship, and a magazine explosion followed, sending thick smoke and debris into the sky. Knyaz Suvorov rolled to port and sank around 7:30 p.m., with only 20 officers rescued earlier by Binyi. Of the 928 crew members aboard, no one else survived. Historian Sir Julian Corbett later noted the incredible bravery of the crew, stating that the ship kept firing as long as any gun remained above water, a testament to their unwavering determination and sacrifice. The story of Knyaz Suvorov and the Battle of Tsushima remains one of the most dramatic and sobering moments in naval history. It's a tale of bravery and loss, of strategies that went wrong, and of a ship that fought until its last breath. The crew of the Knyaz Suvorov faced overwhelming odds, but their determination to stand their ground, even as their ship burned and crumbled around them, is a testament to the human spirit in the face of adversity. While Knyaz Suvorov and the 2nd Pacific Squadron never reached their goal of breaking through to Vladivostok, their sacrifice left a lasting mark on Russian naval history and on the world. The Battle of Tsushima was a turning point that reshaped naval warfare and geopolitical landscapes for years to come. These events remind us that history is not just about the victories and triumphs, but also the moments of courage and defeat. The story of Knyaz Suvorov and her crew is one of those moments, and it deserves to be remembered as an example of fortitude and resilience in the face of impossible odds.